Chapter 5. Rain, rain, go away. Ronduin picked up his jump rope and began jumping. But this time, instead of counting, he jumped to the rhythm of the verse he had said with his mother. Peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot 9 days old. Some like it hot, some like it cold. Some like it in the pot 9 days old. He did this over and over until he had to stop and catch his breath, and then he rested and began again. He had a lot of running energy to put into his jumping. After some time, Ronduin was tired of saying this verse, but he was not tired of jumping. He searched his mind for more rhymes. He tried, to market, to buy a fat pig. Home again, jiggity jig. To market, to buy a fat hog. Home again, jiggity jog. To market, to buy a plum bun. Home again, market is done. Ronduin had to speak this verse 3 times while jumping in order to work out a speaking rhythm that matched his jumps. Once he had the rhythm figured out, he jumped while speaking this verse many times until he was very thirsty. A brown earthenware pitcher of well water sat on a small table near the windows. Ronduin poured water into a cup and swallowed it in big gulps. Outside, the sky poured great gulps of water toward the earth, which was unable to swallow it, unable to let any more water into the earth, for the soil was already fully soaked. Now, another verse popped into Ronduin's mind. Rain, rain, go away, come again another day, for Prince Ronduin wants to play. Ronduin sat cross-legged in front of the window, watching the rain and listening to the ever-changing singing voice of the wind. He found himself adding his own tune to the verse. Rain, rain, go away, come again another day, for Prince Ronduin wants to play. Ronduin sat for a very long time, singing all the songs he knew. Songs he had learned from troubadours, from his mother, from his teacher. After some time he was hungry, and he scooped a lump of peas porridge cold out of the pot into his wooden bowl and filled his cup with water. He ate and he drank, put a log on the fire, and went back to sitting at the window. Something felt so familiar about singing at this window. Now he suddenly remembered many times when he had been very small, long before he knew any of the songs sung at court, sitting at the same window, singing, always singing, making up little songs about rainbows and twinkling stars, about green grass and chirpy birds, and his love for all things that grow under the sun. Smiling as he remembered the little boy he had once been, Ronduin's fingers found the hem of his shirt and softly began to sing, making up the words and the tune. Sun, sun, come back today. Please come back so I can play and run by rivers and climb a tree. Listen, dear son, to my plea. As he finished singing his little song, the rain stopped. The bright disk peeked out between the clouds and caused the new lake in front of the castle to sparkle. 5 ducks appeared. They formed a circle and chased each other round and round. Ronduin smiled at the ducks, and then he remembered that his parents had said that as soon as the rain stopped, they would send the rowboat to the village. I wonder whether they noticed that the sun came out, he thought. They are too busy to be looking out the windows. I better find them and tell them. In a flash, Ronduin had left the room and was walking fast through the hallway, dodging scaffolding and people carrying buckets, mops, hammers, and pieces of wood. Even though it had stopped raining, the roof still leaked, and by the time he had walked all the halls on the upper floor, his hair was wet and he still had not seen his mother or his father or Sir Andrew. Ronduin took the stairs down to the middle floor, where he discovered the hallways were so full of furniture that he had to carefully wend his way around the chairs and chests and huge paintings leaning against heavy tables. Onions. Ronduin smelled onions cooking. He followed this scent around the corner and into a room that had once been a grand sitting room, where his parents met visiting dignitaries. Now it had become a temporary kitchen. The room was darkened by thick curtains, but a bright fire lit one side of the room. Here, a big table covered with bowls, heaps of carrots and potatoes, black pots and cloth sacks stood in front of the hearth, where Agnes stirred a big black iron pot with a wooden spoon. She looked up and smiled. "Ronduin," she said, "come, dear, and stir this pot while I cut potatoes." "Have you seen the king and the queen?" he asked, as he took the spoon and began stirring the boiling, onion-scented liquid. "The rain stopped, and they said that means we must rush to send people to town in the rowboat," he said excitedly. Agnes, a slightly bent old woman with white hair pulled up in a bun, moved slowly toward the window and drew back the curtain. Sunlight streamed into the room, lighting the objects on the table. "It seems like months since we've seen sun," said Agnes, "though it's only been 2 days. Just then, the door to the room swung open so forcefully that it banged against the wall. Looking agitated, Sir Andrew stepped in and shouted, "Ronduin's missing." "No, I'm not," said Ronduin. "I'm right here, stirring the pot. I was looking for you because you need to know that the rain stopped." Sir Andrew rushed to the window and said, "Time to make ready the boat. If the rain holds off, we can get the first boatload to town by dark. Agnes, can you spare this young lad? I can use his help." "Of course," said Agnes, as the king and queen entered the room. Suddenly, it occurred to Ronduin that his parents might be unhappy with him for leaving the upstairs sitting room, even though it had been for a good reason. He looked closely at his mother's expression. He knew her well enough to see in her calm expression that she had not heard that he was missing. "It stopped raining," announced Sir Andrew. "I need Prince Ronduin to help ready the boat." "Certainly," said the king, looking at Ronduin with a gleam in his eye. "Ronduin is certainly old enough to begin doing real work." Ronduin smiled. After the rainy days alone, real work sounded very good. Chapter 6. The Green Boat. "Where is this boat?" asked Ronduin, as he and Sir Andrew descended the spiral staircase. "You've been looking at it since you were a babe," said Sir Andrew, laughing. Now they rounded a curve. There should have been 5 more steps to the landing, but instead, Ronduin looked at water. Floodwaters had risen to cover the bottom steps, and as Ronduin looked out toward the wide open doors of the great dining hall, he saw water everywhere. Peering through the dimness, he could see that the long table and the velvet-covered chairs were missing. No doubt they had been carried to the second floor. Instead of the usual furniture, Ronduin was surprised to see that scaffolding had been set up to hold planks that led into the dining hall. The scaffolding did not reach the stairway. Instead, a long, single, narrow board was supported by a step on one end and the platform the scaffold made on the other end. Sir Andrew said, "Wait until I cross." The board sagged as he crossed it, but he kept his balance, and, stepping onto the more stable platform, he turned to Ronduin and said, "Now you walk across." Ronduin moved quickly across the narrow plank with grace and ease. Together they walked down the wooden pathway that crossed the entry hall and through the open doors into the dining hall. This wooden pathway over water reminded Ronduin of the docks he had visited at the seashore. But, he thought, this is not the same at all. There should not be a dock in the great dining hall. And then there it was, tied to the makeshift dock, a big green rowboat. Ronduin looked at the boat, and then he looked up toward the high ceiling, remembering that once a green boat hung high above the room, held by stout ropes. He had always thought the boat was a decoration. Now he realized it had a purpose. The ropes that once held the boat hung slack from the ceiling, and the green boat floated by a dock where there should have been a long banquet table. "In you go," said Sir Andrew, taking Ronduin's hand so he could step across the water into the green boat. Ronduin sat on the thwart, and Sir Andrew stepped into the boat and picked up one of the 2 oars that lay in the vessel. "Can you untie us? Then we'll be off across the small sea," said Sir Andrew, smiling. Ronduin untied the rope, and then Sir Andrew used the oar as a pole to push the boat out the great doors into the hallway toward the bottom of the stone stairs. Here, he pivoted the boat and pulled the craft backward to the bottom step. "Now, Ronduin, please step out and hold the boat in place. There seems to be no place to tie the boat except for that wobbly board, and I fear that if we tied to that board, the boat would pull it into the water, and they would both float away. So, holding the boat will be your job while we get people and supplies on board." Stepping off the boat onto the stairs, Sir Andrew said, "Hold tight, I'll be right back." And then he was bounding up the spiral stairs and soon out of sight. Ronduin sat alone on the cold, damp stone step, holding the transom of the green boat. Sir Andrew's footsteps, at first loud, became softer, softer, until Ronduin heard the creaky opening and closing of the heavy oak door at the second-floor landing. Light filtered through small windows in the stairwell, brightening the surface of the water that had transformed the ground floor of the castle into a small lake. Ronduin felt as if he were in a dream. Nothing about sitting on a step holding a rowboat from floating away inside the castle felt familiar. Yet even as the dreams in which he could fly or speak with animals made sense as he was dreaming them, somehow this made sense too. Ronduin sat holding the boat for a long time. He didn't decide to start humming and then singing. It just seemed to happen. The sound of his gentle voice echoed faintly off the castle walls. He made up songs about ducks swimming in a circle, about a green boat on a great sea, about the sun coming out and drying the land, and the green grass growing, and the trees budding, and the flowers blooming, about running to the spring festival, and then the door creaked again. This time, the footfalls were softer and slower, and soon his mother stood beside him, her arms very full with a cloth grain bag. "Thank you for holding the boat," she said, setting the bag 3 steps up from Ronduin on a dry area. "We are sending all the villagers home with bags of grain and dried peas and turnips and onions, so that their families will have enough to eat while we wait for dry land to appear. We will send 5 villagers and their supplies in this first trip." Sounds of voices filled the stairway. "Ah, here they come now," she said. Soon the boat was laden with bags and baskets full of food, and 5 workers stood on the steps ready to board the boat. Sir Andrew stood next to Ronduin, who had continued to hold the boat in place as people loaded the supplies. The first worker had just stepped into the green rowboat when the king's strong voice could be heard high above them, booming into the stairway.
The storm has returned with great wind and heavy downpours,
he shouted. The people standing in the stairway let out a long sigh. Ronduin sighed too. Chapter 7. 3 Linen Bags. Sir Andrew and Ronduin stepped into the rowboat, and Sir Andrew pulled it into the dining hall, where Ronduin stepped out and tied it to the makeshift dock so it wouldn't float away. Then they walked back over to the scaffolding and took turns stepping across the wobbly board that brought them back to the steps. Climbing upward, Ronduin noticed a pile of carrots and onions at the side of the step. "Why were these left?" asked Ronduin.
I'm guessing the person carrying them had full arms, and these were loose, and they didn't have a bag or a basket to put them in,"
said Sir Andrew.
"I guess we shouldn't leave them here, because someone could trip on them in the dark."
"I'll take them with me," said Ronduin, who lifted the hem of his shirt to make a pouch and place the vegetables in it. "I'll bring them back when the rain stops and we try again." Returning to the sitting room, Ronduin placed the onions and carrots on the table and opened his mother's sewing box. He removed layers of cloth until he found what he was looking for: a stack of folded, plain linen. Ronduin unfolded the cloth and was pleased to discover that it was in 3 pieces, and these pieces could be folded in half to make good-sized bags. Ronduin brought the pieces of cloth and a needle and thread to the window. He sat on the floor, listening to the steady rain, and began to sew. Finishing the first bag, he realized that his legs were stiff. He found his jump rope and jumped while counting. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. After doing this 3 times, Ronduin wondered if he could figure out how to count by 6s. He jumped while he spoke the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he shouted 6. He continued with 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, with a shout for 12. And then he continued with 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and he wasn't sure whether he should shout for 18 or 19. He stopped and counted on his fingers. He wiggled each finger as he said the number. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. When he came to 18, he had to use the thumb of his other hand. That means it's 18, he thought. Then he realized that he had another bag to make, and thought, I'll figure out the rest of the numbers tomorrow. Ronduin walked to the table and filled one of the bags with the onions and carrots. He was just finishing sewing the second bag when his father, the king, entered the room with Sir Andrew. "There's not enough bags for people who are taking home vegetables," said Ronduin, "so I'm making some."
"Your mother told me we need more bags,"
said the king. "How many do we need?" asked Ronduin.
"She said we just used up the bags that we have, and 18 people still need a bag,"
said the king. Ronduin imagined a neat stack of 18 linen bags. "Well," said Ronduin, "I'm close to finishing these 3. If 6 more people could sew 3 bags each, we'll have enough. That's if we have enough cloth. The queen's sewing box doesn't have any more plain cloth." Sir Andrew said,
"I can look for plain cloth in the storage room, and needles, and thread. And I think I can find 6 people who are no longer working. The crew that was carrying things to the 2nd floor is done. I'm not sure they all know how to sew, however. Send them to the new kitchen after supper,
said the king. I can teach them, said Ronduin. The king smiled and said,
Now we have a plan.